Planet Dolan. What do you call a stalactite made of snot? What kind of cave creature has transparent skin, lives to be 100 years old and go 10 years without eating? From nightclubs to ancient chemical weapons, here are 10 of the strangest things ever found in caves. How's it going? I'm Danger Dolan. I'm here to decipher some random things I found on the internet the other day that I think you might be interested in.
Number 10.
30 million people. China is home to a group of traditionalists who live in caves, but even though some of those caves date back more than 4,000 years, today's cave dwellers in China aren't anything like cavemen. Today's cave houses are actually relatively modern, so much so that there's actually massive demand from people who want to move out of their city apartments and into these cave homes, but they're hard to buy, because the people who live in them rarely want to leave. Many of the homes are wired with electricity, running water, don't even need heating or cooling. It's estimated that about 30 million of China's population currently lives in some form of cave home.
Number 9.
The stalagmites and stalactites, do you know how to tell the difference? Well, here's one that's a lot easier to tell the difference with. A snotite is different from a stalagmite/stalactite in that it appears to be made of snot. This particular brand of cave slime is of course not actually nasal mucus. It's a colony of single-celled bacteria that feeds on volcanic sulfur and produces waste about as acidic as battery acid. One theory holds that if there is life on Mars, it could be subterranean and similarly primitive like snotite.
Number 8.
In the Catskill Mountains of New York, one cave left a particularly striking impression. What's the first thing you think of when you think of a cursed doll or effigy? Is it something like this? Nails in the eyes, noose around the neck? It's basically the most haunted thing you could ever expect to find anywhere, and it wasn't found in some remote wasteland, it was in New York.
Number 7.
The Hotel Las Cuevas in Trinidad, Cuba, that's the city in the country of Cuba, has an odd claim to fame. Has a nightclub. Okay, that's not weird. Of course, a big hotel would have a nightclub, but the nightclub is in a cave, and it holds 5,000 people. The Discoteca Ayala has 3 bars, 5 dance floors, and a sign that looks like it belongs on a food truck hanging over a door that looks like it leads to a dungeon. Just make sure you find the right place, and not an actual dungeon.
Number 6.
If you heard there was a place called the Cave of Death, where would you expect it to be? So here's a place in Scotland called the Cave of Death, and they're aptly named because they're littered with dead bodies. Many of them the bodies are children, or at least their heads impaled on poles. It's widely assumed to have been a site for ancient human sacrifice.
Number 5.
An underground tunnel found dating back to the war between the Persians and Romans features a lot of dead bodies, but no signs of a fight. What it shows is the first known example of chemical warfare. During a siege, the Romans and Persians were both tunneling toward one another. Eventually, each side heard the other's tunneling efforts as they bypassed each other. The Romans had the idea to burst into the Persians' tunnel to attack them, but the Persians had already withdrawn and come up with a new plan. They filled their tunnel with toxic gas from burning bitumen and sulfur crystals. The Romans burst into the tunnel and immediately started breathing in the toxic fumes. 20 soldiers died within minutes as the fumes turned to acid in their lungs.
Number 4.
The Olm salamander looks a lot like a worm, but may be one of the closest things we have to baby dragons. The earliest mentions of them in the 1600s tend to refer to them as such. The reality is they are actually way weirder than dragons. These rare little creatures lack any pigmentation in their skin, have evolved to be blind, but have acute senses of smell and hearing. That's because they live their entire lives in the complete darkness of underground caves. There they live to be 100 years old and go 10 years without eating.
Number 3.
UFO and occult enthusiasts across the world rejoiced in 2017 when an old Nazi briefcase was found in a cave near a small village in Russia. Inside the briefcase was deformed, elongated skulls, look kinda humanish, but also really not. So basically they look like alien skulls. Naturally, this has set up conspiracies that Hitler was an alien or working with aliens, but it's more likely these skulls are a result of some intentional deformation of skulls common to Crimea around 2,000 years ago, but we don't know anything for sure yet.
Number 2.
In November 2007, a Russian Doomsday Cult calling itself the True Russian Orthodox Church went underground. Literally, they holed themselves up in an underground cave, convinced that the world was going to end in fire and brimstone sometime that spring. The only thing that ended in the spring was the cave itself. The melting snow caused part of the roof to start caving in. The cultists were forced to leave their cave home as the structure became unstable.
Number 1.
In July 2018, a giant black sarcophagus was unearthed in the burial tomb near Alexandria, Egypt. Despite fears of an ancient and powerful curse, the foolish mortals who uncovered the ancient casket opened the lid anyway. The curse that sprang forth wasn't anything like the mummy, it came from the internet. See, the sarcophagus was filled with some sort of juice. An oddly coloured red liquid sat inside alongside 3 ancient skeletons. Naturally, the internet wanted to drink it and gain its powers, even after authorities revealed that it was actually just sewage that had leaked in at some point. You can only imagine what that stuff would have tasted like, mixed with a Tide Pod. This video was made possible by our fans over on Patreon. Thanks for your support, guys. That is it for this countdown. Have a good one!